There's 15 of them for $600. It's all over the place.
Yeah.
Can you guys hear me? Hello?
Yes, sir. You are fine, Bill.
Oh,
Bill,
finally.
can you hear me?
Okay.
Yeah, all right. The only thing I would say is we got you from the eyeglasses up. We're missing. Adjust your camera a little bit.
Yes.
We got
that's
a
what
three-quarter headshot
here for you. Yeah.
Let me practice what I preach.
Yeah.
Will Randine be joining us?
She's not been able to sign in. I guess she worked with Allan for a long time, and I don't think she will be. How's that?
Oh, that's perfect, man. Perfect. Okay, let me get started officially. We want to welcome everyone watching this program on replay, and thank you for joining us. I'm Steve, the Bookman Eisenstein, and this is the Rare Book Cafe, the first and only Blab television program in the entire world about antiquarian books. Thank you for joining us on Blab.im. The Rare Book Cafe is brought to you by the Florida Antiquarian Book Fair. My regular guest today is my good friend and co-host Thorne Donnelley of Liberty Books, 333 Clematis Street, West Palm Beach. And joining us from 5201 Vernon Avenue, Suite 123. And help me out on that one.
Minneapolis, Minnesota. There you go, Steve.
Minnesota is Bill Korst from the Appraisers International Society. And I thought we would be joined by Randine Cummings, also from the IS, but technical difficulties. That's why I say paper cups and strength. As always, through the miracle of modern technology, visitors to our live show can send text comments. So click away and we'll be watching. Later in the program, or actually any time during the program, if you have a question for us, you want to find out what something's worth, you want a clarification on a point that we're talking about, type in a question. And right now we have an open camera seat, so if somebody wants to join us, let me know what you're talking about. We're not looking to be punked. Thank you. The pair of hands that you see in the corner of each picture represent applause. If you like what we're saying, let us know. Thank God they don't have something to tell us you don't like what they're saying. And finally, this program is being recorded so you and your friends can watch the replay on Blab or on the Florida Antiquarian Book Fair blog at floridabookfair.blogspot.com. That's floridabookfair.blogspot.com. Bill, we are honored to have you and the Appraisers International Society with us today. And we are going to be talking about appraisals, about the Appraisers International Society. But I just want to, for the purpose of letting the group that is watching us and who will be watching us in the future know what an appraisal is, okay? That's my folder. And inside the folder, there's some paper, you know. The paper has words and a title sheet on it. So basically, this is the appraisal of a collection. I'm not afraid to show it because it will be in this collection of architecture and material is being used right now at Florida International University in their architecture department. And it is the collection of Barry Sugarman, a very world-famous architect. And on the cover sheet, we give the basic information. You correct me anywhere I'm wrong, Bill, okay? Please.
Okay.
On the appraisal, it states what it is. It's the appraisal of the architectural archives of the late Barry Sugarman. On this one, it's date of death, April 16th, prepared by me at the request of Barbara Sugarman for the purpose of establishing the date of death value and of making a gift to her son, Andrew Uber, as of, and values are as of. So we state the values, and that's basically the cover sheet. And then you have an appraisal report, which is basically describing property description. Oh, let me get in order. Hold on a second. No, okay. Page 2, page 3. Where'd page 1 go? Hold on a second, guys. Hold on a second.
Well, Steve,
Well,
let me just jump in and say it's nice to be with you, Steve, and with Thorne, and it's my pleasure to be here. And I know that the kind of the subject or the topic of this blab is why you might need an appraiser. What do you need an appraiser for? So I've got kind of a top 10 list or whatever. But I mean, go ahead, Steve. You were dealing with your appraisal report there.
Well, okay. It goes into property descriptions, value conclusions, limiting conditions, the appraiser certificate, the appraisal method, the property description, client information, and other things in the beginning, and that is then followed by a detailed description of the inventory, and it's accompanied by photographs of the items described. Bill, take over.
Well, you've described one intended use of an appraisal. Appraisals can actually take many different forms. Actually, you could have a verbal appraisal just if somebody just wanted some verbal assessment of something. That's fine as long as you do it properly. There's preliminary reports, there's restricted reports, there's all sorts of different types of ways of reporting to clients as long as it meets their needs. And that's what it comes down to is establishing a scope of work that is acceptable to the client and an agreed upon scope of work. So that's what it really comes down to. As I mentioned, Steve and Thorne, I kind of had worked up a list just to kind of stay with the subject theme for this blab. And so I just worked up a quick 10, and we can concentrate on some of these. But insurance is one that a lot of people think of, right away when they think of why they need an appraisal, why they need a valuer to actually report to them and the insurance company then what the valuation is so they can bind insurance. And another one is selling. I mean, I'm sure that both of you get this all the time, and that is people come to you and go, what is this worth? Well, there's different types of worth out there depending on the market that you're in, what market they're operating in. Yes. And so many times people don't understand that there's different markets out there, different levels, wholesale, retail, different, if you're going to sell it at auction, if you're going to sell it to a dealer, there's all different types of markets out there. And when we talk about market value, we talk about what the buyer actually pays, what the typical price that a buyer pays in that market. And so sometimes there's commissions, sometimes there's auction fees. There's all sorts of different things that would affect the net to the seller in that case. And so a trained valuer would be able to lay out all those options to their client and say, maybe you want a multi-value report representing different markets, for instance. And once they understand that, maybe they pick one, maybe they pick all of the above, to be reported on. And so then it comes down to maybe we do a preliminary report for them saying, you've got a large collection, I understand, and let's look at a sampling of that to see if this, and we'll do an analysis, we'll do a valuation to be able to see if that's going to meet your needs then. And then if it does, then you perhaps go forward with more authentication, more identification, more discussing the markets, that type of thing. So there's as you can see, it gets a lot, involved with that. Another typical reason that a person may want an appraiser is for buying, not just for selling. They might want some pre-purchase consultation or post-purchase consultation if they made a good buy. And here again, we have to put on our valuer's hats and not our dealer's hats in this case and go, let's look at the market that you purchased this in, and let's see if it's the typical price you would find, and understand that it's a range of prices out there in the marketplace. And just because you might have paid a little bit more than the typical price in that market doesn't mean you got ripped off. It just means that this is the price that that was charged for this, and it's a fair price within that scope, within that range of prices. Other typical reasons would be in the U.S. anyways, and there's jurisdictions all over the world for this, and that is an estate or type tax. You might need an appraisal for that. And so they're not only federal, but there's state jurisdictions that have state estate taxes. And sometimes they coincide with the federal, sometimes they don't. Sometimes you have to know the difference. And so a trained valuer would be able to report upon jurisdiction specific then for their client. Charitable contributions. Steve, I know you do a lot of work with charitable contributions, donations, that type of thing. And that would be another reason. And maybe, again, if a person has a big collection, you might want to say, well, let's do a preliminary report first for you and see if this is going to work for your needs. If it does, then we'll go forward with additional required work and efforts. Instead of just saying it's going to be 500 hours of work, take it or leave it. I mean, there's a preliminary type situation you can get involved in. Another one is casualty loss. Let's just say a person had a theft, a fire, whatever reason, and let's just say that the insurance didn't cover it fully, or it had no insurance on that. Many times, an appraiser is needed to establish casualty loss. And here again, they need their professional accountant. They need their CPA to be able to advise them if with their tax situation, if they can take advantage of this. But that would be another reason that one may need a valuer, an appraiser. An insurance claim dispute, loss of value, maybe damage to the piece, and there's a dispute with the insurance company, and they needed a valuer to step in and actually provide some needed analysis and needed reporting that would help them with that situation. Collateral is another one. We see this all the time where lenders, whether it's banks or lending institutions of any sort, might be willing to accept personal property as collateral. And so that's where a valuer would step in and be able to do a professional job, hopefully, with providing that information. Not only what market value would be, but perhaps that lender would also want to know if they had to dispose of that quickly within 30 days, for instance, or 60 days, what they could realize in that situation. There could be two different figures there. So they may want reporting on both situations in that. Divorce is another one where here again, it's jurisdiction specific. Different laws, not only in the U.S., but I'm sure around the world. Free market economies where you need to establish market value, and so that there could be some sort of an amicable settlement in that situation. Bankruptcy is another one where you need to establish whether it's corporate, where let's just say it's a manufacturer of product, and they need to know what perhaps the value is as an ongoing basis if somebody stepped in and took over that, or if it was just be liquidation, quick liquidation. So time is really an element in a lot of these situations. We know that if somebody walks into a dealer and says, how much do you give me for this? Many times it's cash on the spot. And so that typically would be one of the lowest types of values in a market. Pawn shop, for instance, if somebody said, boy, I just want to borrow some money for a couple of weeks. I mean, that's another situation where they might want a valuation, for that. So that's kind of my top 10 list, Stephen Thorne, as far as different reasons a person may want an appraiser.
I wish you could type those 10 words into the instant message bar, because I think that's phenomenal. And I know there's hundreds of them, aren't there?
Well, I mean, we could go on and on and on. Actually,
right.
There's unlimited when you when you think about. There's all sorts of different scope of works possible, with the client. So really, I mean, we could talk about 10 or 15 or 20 of intended uses of reports, and this is very important too. That it within that that appraisal report, it'd be defined who this report is for. So a third party doesn't step in and go, oh, I'm going to use this report where it's really not for them. And so we see that all the time. Go ahead, Steve.
I have used that as a disclaimer. This is the sole purpose of that as a report. You said something that actually is personal right now, because I'm not doing it, but I'd like to know the answer. This has to do with the Cuban collection that's coming up. Can an appraiser list a price of an artwork without authentication?
Well, sure, they can list it without authentication, but then it needs to be disclosed to the client then and have it acceptable, as that's part of your scope of work then. I mean, everything needs to be transparent with the client, and it needs to be agreed upon. So in other words, if you say to the client, listen, we can do this appraisal report without proper authentication. The authentication could be done as an add-on if you wish. But again, that's a perfect situation for a just a starter type of appraisal, just something that you're doing as a preliminary, and so sure, I mean anything can be done as far as there's disclosure as far as how it's being done, and so that it's very, very clear to the reader of that report who the report is for, what market it's for, how it operates within that market. I mean, a lot of people just think about value as some elusive thing where there's just one price for everything out there. No, I mean, there's all sorts of different levels of markets. There's all sorts of different ways, all different markets, and levels within that market. So, for instance, let's just say somebody contacted me with a mineral collection, for instance, and they were in another country. I could do a preliminary on that just based on photographs, but it must then state in my report to them that it was based on their photographs, and it probably will require more authentication, seen some sampling, that type of thing of their collection, to be able to go further for a more I wouldn't say a more proper report, just a more complete report. Let's put it that way.
Okay.
So there's different levels of that, but I mean, we're involved with that all the time, where somebody from another country is contacting us and going, "Can you help us?" We can put a value based on any statement and any statement out there, but there might be so many limiting conditions in that okay. I don't know.
Okay, so let me rephrase the question. For donation, can something like a piece of art be donated without authentication, with the proper disclaimers that it wasn't authenticated? Would that not raise a red flag to the IRS?
For that particular purpose, I would say yes. When we look at fair market value, we're looking at what we consider it to be pure market value. In pure market value, we need to look at highest and best use. And many times, all the time, authentication is a part of that. And if it's we need authentication experts in that situation to be able to consult with in that situation. But yes, you're absolutely right. It would raise red flags if we're saying in that report, we haven't done authentication on this. I mean, it's like, the burden is on the taxpayer in that situation. The burden is on the taxpayer in a situation where, in anything like that, so if a casualty loss, if it's charitable donation, the burden is on the taxpayer to prove, that they have done it correctly. The appraiser has done it correctly. And so the onus is on them in that situation. And so I would say that to be able to turn that in for charitable contribution for your client and be missing big parts of authentication would be problematic. Absolutely.
Just wanted to make sure, because the way you said it, I wasn't sure. It created you used the word authentication. and possibly because of the next reason that you were stating, I got confused. Bill, tell, like, for the sake of the recording and whoever's on board right now, people want to learn more about AIS. How did they reach you? Who did they contact?
Well, the AIS is multidisciplinary, first of all. So we deal with all different types of personal property, whether it be rare books, fine art, gems and jewelry, racehorses, helicopters. I mean, whatever it is. I mean, the principles that govern valuation is the same across the board. Now, the applied methodology is different to those specialties, obviously, dealing with different subject matters. But all the principles are the same. So, the way they can contact me is by email at Bill Korst, Korst, at aisociety.com. They can certainly contact me there. Whether it's related to how they get involved with valuation science themselves, for instance. You can do it either with some fundamental courses, or if they want to go to all the way through our program, for instance, they'll be learning about tax revenue, expert witness, trial consultant, that whole fascinating field where it takes valuation experts to be able to stand up under scrutiny in a court of law, for instance. Are you going to be able to pass what we call voir dire? Or would you meet a Daubert challenge, for instance, in court? Many would not. Many would not, because they don't understand.
Define those for the audience.
Well, voir dire is actually a procedure where the court actually qualifies a person as an expert witness, to accept their testimony in a court of law. And if the other side, for instance, if you pass voir dire and if you get into the court proceedings, and the other side finds something very problematic with what you're saying, what you're doing, they could actually ask for a Daubert hearing. Daubert is actually comes back to it started out as in the 1990s, I believe it was. Daubert was I forget what the case was, but Daubert was going against somebody, and it had to do with scientific evidence. And so, what was the norm for scientific evidence out there? What was acceptable? And then later it became, I think it was in the later 90s, it became all types of properties, not just scientific, dealing with expert witnesses. So that's really some of the states have gotten away from Daubert, but Daubert is still the in federal court, for instance, in the U.S. that is still the standard, the Daubert standard. So that gives you a little bit of information if you want to Google it. Daubert, Daubert, and you will find some interesting information there. So that gives you some background, Steve.
The AIS chats, I find them fascinating. People can just join in from the outside on these chats?
Well, actually, it's what you're referring to as the AI LinkedIn channel that we've got going, and now it's almost 1,600 on there and growing. People are coming on almost daily because they find it fascinating. Actually, anybody that's not actually a member of that forum, can actually look on and read and see, what is being said, to actually make contributions and actually be able to type in and communicate back and forth with people on there about their insights or their whatever their input is on a subject matter. They need to actually be a member. It's very easy. I mean, if you go to the LinkedIn, the AI Society LinkedIn channel, you just click on there, I want to be a member, and you're usually approved within 24 hours. So, I mean, and then they can go at it with however that we encourage a lot of interaction. In fact, it was just the other day there was a gal from France, and she came out with something in one of the forums, and then somebody else came back and she said, "Well, I apologize." No, there's no reason to apologize. I mean, everyone's at different levels and valuation. Everyone's at different levels with their specialties, and what we do is encourage a lot of these people just to jump in and get involved with their input again. It's very fascinating because there are members of that forum from all over the world in specialties that you would not believe. I think you've seen some of that,
13th
Steve.
13th century papal jewelry.
There you go.
Anybody that could talk about 13th century papal jewelry, I want to talk to other things about, and her name was Celine, and it was a very interesting post, I get fascinated. I don't have the time for those kind of things, but God, dude, are they enjoyable.
Right. But I mean, there's people on there with specialties that will just blow your mind. It's like you say, whether it's 13th century this or that or whatever. And these people are some of the top people in the world in their specialties, not necessarily in valuation, but in their specialties. And that's actually a very good point to make right now. And that is the appraisement services can actually it's look at it as an umbrella. Appraisement services, it's an umbrella. It can include one or all of these different things. That could be identification, authentication, grading, analysis of the quality of the product, for instance, and it can include valuation. And so if somebody says, I want you to authenticate this, that is part of the appraisal process. They're not being asked for valuation on that situation necessarily, but they're being asked for to authenticate that it is a first edition of a certain rare book, for instance, or of a 13th century this or that, or a Monet or a Fabergé or whatever you have. That's the authentication process. Or maybe a cashmere sapphire that would go for far more than the provenance from another locale like Burma or Sri Lanka or whatever, because it's a high quality piece, and that's what the market is paying for those goods right now. So provenance is actually a very intriguing field, and authentication is a very important need for all sorts of specialties out there.
I love provenance. I love the study of whose it was, why it is, what it was. Thorne, any thoughts?
Well, a little bit in that my field is basically for books. I don't do autographs. I don't do artwork. To quote Steve, if I ever get to know 5% of this business, I'll die a happy man. So
one. If you're going to quote me accurately, 1%. 5%.
What I have just gotten, I may put it, I'm not sure I'm going to do it. I have about 40 Wizard of Oz books that somebody's asked me to look at. And I have a couple things. One I got recently is this book right here. Now, this is the definitive reference book on Oz. It was published about 2 years ago. It's actually on Frank Baum, the author of Oz. This particular copy, I thought we'd all get a kick out of. It's signed by the two authors and Frank Baum's grandson, Mr. Paul Baum, I guess his name is, or son of the grandson of the guy that wrote The Wizard of Oz. But so this gives me and it's very true. Behind this is just reference books, and it gives me very elaborate descriptions of various editions, states, whatever. We all know how that works. There's no prices in here. Nor should there be, because all I want to know is tell what the thing is. So then I'm forced to go to something like A, which I don't think is all that great, but it's a starting place. And then in this particular case, there are several dealers who specialize in Wizard of Oz or Baum material. And I was just wondering that are most appraisal things set up like that, where we have a definitive reference for identification? This is a this particular kind of stone, in my case, a book, an edition, whatever. And then, as you're saying, there's valuations of between cash walk in the door, auction price plus 20. I mean, that spread right there is probably 100% between cash
Right.
door and auction price. You know,
Right. Exactly.
I'm not asking you any tricks of your trade, but do you find that you have adequate reference for most of your subjects, but then your pricing is also, again, auction and whatever? Did you have, well, I guess what I'm getting at is, do you have lovely, well thought out bibliographies of all your stuff? Like I have 500 sitting behind me, and Poe and Steinbeck and Baum and all that stuff. Does that work for you guys?
Well, I think in my specialty with gems and jewelry, there is not one specific authentication or authoritative source, so to speak. It's kind of a cumulative. It's a cumulative, and it's once you're in the business a long time, you know where to go and where not to go. You know, to get information. These days, there's all sorts of information available on the internet, for instance. Well, some of it could be correct, some of it may not be correct, you know. So you have to be careful there too.
Let me try and answer that in book terminology, okay? Because I understand, I knew the conflict that was coming up in the way the question was posed because of gems and books, okay? But here's the thing: your L. Frank Baum reference book would be listed under methodology. Methodology being what did you use to establish that this is, you know. So, you know, if I'm doing an appraisal, I will list whatever reference material I have used for that. So that's what it is. And you're right, you shouldn't have a price. You're just going there for authentication with points and making sure it is a first edition and all that. Okay. Then you ask about prices, you know. Okay, prices are based on comparables, as you were asking it, and your knowledge of whether these comparable prices are on the market, off the market, you know, based on opinion, based on fact. Take over from there, Bill.
Well, yeah, comparables is a big deal. Obviously, we need to look at comparables in the market, but it's not one price, it's not two prices, it's the market and what it's doing typically in that market. And that's why it takes knowledge in that market. You just don't go online and go, well, I'm going to research this and come up with some figure because, you know, I can do it and I have no knowledge of that market. No, it doesn't work that way. It works in unison there, where you have knowledge of a marketplace, and maybe you're getting your basis then for that substantiation for that valuation through something that you can hang your hat on, so to speak, and you can put down a piece of paper that these are my comparables. I mean, we see that in real estate appraisals all the time, where a real estate appraiser would actually list their comps, for instance, and then show how they've actually made some adjustments for their property based on those comps. We see that, and so there's some good comparisons with personal property and real estate in that. However, personal property is much more complicated in that they're movable. I mean, they're different. There's a lot of different markets. With real estate, you've got one location that property is at, and it's a lot simpler to be able to come up with a market value based on comparables in that area, for instance. Where with personal property, it could be all over the world, and it could be many more markets at play. So that really is the job of the valuer to actually disseminate that information to their client in a way that the client then can choose what market they want reported. Let's just say that they're looking to sell something, for instance. And you say, you know, we could be looking at an auction market. We could looking at sell to a dealer. We could looking at if you've got a friend that wants to buy it, for instance, what would be market value that would be typical out there? I mean, so we could look at a variety of different things, you know.
Go ahead, Thorne.
When you say the price to a friend.
Oh. Well, you know, and then,
yeah, I mean, a valuer should be able to give market value based on the most common market for that, and be able to report it that way. It's very, very critical to define that market, though, that's being reported on. You don't want it being elusive and it has to be guessed about, well, what market are they talking about here? And so many times in my industry, we see appraisers that are not really valuers. They think they are, but they would just say something like replacement value, such and such. What market? What level of the market? I mean, what do you think? What are they thinking about in their mind?
The thing that go ahead, Thorne.
This really kind of, in my case, was the real estate business, but in South Florida, we've noticed in the last maybe year a resurgence in values. Back in today's headline in the paper is home prices are back almost the 2008 level. Fine.
Take a time machine and go.
Are things such as commodities, diamonds, and now perhaps it's artworks, whatever. Do you run into a time situation that your appraisal is good for a year? I mean, obviously prices fluctuate. I totally understand what you say about different markets, but there's also a time frame. Your appraisal, I was just looking, oddly enough, that I didn't know you were coming today. An appraisal done almost 20 years ago at my home in Aspen about some artwork, which has drastically changed in price. I'm in the process of cleaning out some things, but I know that obviously would be way out of line for an appraisal. The guideline where you would say, or just have to be your own judgment? I'm just curious how that.
Thorne, that's a very, very important question. Thanks for bringing that up. The effective date of an appraisal should be for a date specific, that day only. The market, I mean, it might be not changing for 10 years. It may be changing the next day. I don't know. I mean, that's the way markets perform. And so the effective date should be very, very date specific. What that value is based on a certain date.
Right here. Date. Appraisals are as of October 14th, whatever the year was on that. I can see. Tell me if I'm wrong on this, Bill, but shouldn't that be part of the preamble? The very question that Thorne is asking.
Absolutely. It needs to be right up front. So right up front, right at the top. This appraisal is for this date only.
Right after the intended, right after the client's name, the intended purpose, and the date. Should I change? No, I'm joking.
Yeah, there's different formats used that can be used in reporting, and it really depends upon the professionalism. I shouldn't say the professionalism, just the method that person wants to use in a professional way. Let's put it that way. Right now, the AI Society is going through what we call the appraisal reporter workshop or clinic, and to all its members right now as a form of an update recertification for our members. And it's a very intriguing 25-hour module of some great stuff as far as different ways to report, proper ways to report, the language that really needs to be included, but really it comes down to is meeting the needs of the client and disclosing to limit it to sometimes it's limited to just that client in what we call a restricted report, saying this is for your eyes only. Can't be used by anybody else. There could be a need or a reason for that. It could be that it's only for two people, for the insured and for the insurer, for instance. Everybody else butt out. You're not involved in this appraisal. And you need to make those things clear so that some third party can't attach to that some point down the road and go, well, I use this and it hurt me financially. I'm suing you. It's like, wait a minute, this was not for you. It was disclosed in there that was not for you. So you have no basis for your litigation here. So, anyways,
I think as a book dealer, the hardest thing in appraising after meeting you and Ellie and everybody else was the market, the market you're in versus. So I think I've come to a clearer picture of that, but there's still confusion. If you're buying maps in the region that you're in, they're going to be more expensive. Go to somewhere diametrically opposed on the earth to where you are and find the same map. It'll be cheaper. And that, with the market, absolutely makes sense. What might be confusion, because it was in my mind, and like, you know, anybody in the book business that is not learning about the appraisal, the science of the appraisal, is that a book like, I don't know, Hemingway's whatever, 3 poems and 10 stories, you know, it's a 5-figure book no matter where you go in the civilized world, that they recognize what that book is. If you had a serious buyer for that book in South Africa, in Idaho, in Moscow, in France, and Spain, I would think the number would be more universal than, say, the map. But it emphasizes the market. You know, what is the item? Where is its best market?
Well, Steve, in that situation, look at it this way. If a person held that book, for instance, and said, Steve, I want to know how much I can get. I need to sell it tomorrow. How much can I get?
Where are you?
That's a whole different question than what is the market value on this. Whole different question.
My first question to that person would be, where are you right now?
Where are you? Where? Geographically, the world?
Somebody calls me up and says, I have 3 poems and 10 stories, and I got to turn it to cash tomorrow. Can you tell me where I would sell it? As an appraiser, or, you know, as an appraiser, I would ask them, where are they? They could be calling me from, you know, the middle of a desert somewhere.
Oh, absolutely. That kind of came up in a situation. I don't know. It was a while back. With somebody from Ireland that said, "Can you tell me the value of such and such?" I think it was a piece of jewelry or a gemstone or something like that. They're in Ireland. And I go, "Well, why don't you do some research in Ireland and see what the market is there in Ireland?" This is not universal. This is not the same everywhere, what the market values would be. So yes, it needs to be very specific as far as what your market you're reporting geographically also. Yes, that's correct, Steve.
Yeah, okay. No, I just, you know, because that's something I'm trying to, I'm resolving it with more and more thought, because it was foreign when I first heard it, but it's beginning to make more sense.
Can he talk?
Hold on, something's going in my background. Who is that? What's up?
Sale tomorrow.
Guys, can you carry on for a second? I'm about to find out whether this is one of 600 or just signed. It's about Philip Roth's Portnoy's complaint. Okay, I'll take the phone call.
Hey,
give me the phone. Give me the phone. I don't have much time. Hello? Hello?
I'm trying to tell him that don't go over that because
there's nobody there.
He's not looking.
She just there.
Thorne, what else? Thorne, what else have you got?
Okay, there is a very famous.
I can't hear it.
Well, then listen.
Go ahead.
By Bill Dunning, and it's
hi Trina. How are you?
Book to Die. And I happen to have.
That's all right. No problem. We're talking about books. They're talking. Bill Korst is on from the Appraisers International Society. That's not a problem.
Signed by him. When you buy something unique and pay twice what it's worth.
I know the name. Steinberg. Yes.
So I just thought that throw that your appraisal completely out.
Okay, say that one more time. Steve was talking over you there too. So
complaint, son. We're going to come over tomorrow for sure.
Where?
Okay. I'm going to after I tell you what I'm going to tell you. I got to give the Portnoy's complaint. Did you notice if you said it was signed? Is it one of 600?
I still can't hear you. Steve is over talking.
I'll let you know tomorrow if it's still.
Okay.
Gotcha. Okay. Gotcha. Then I got it.
Okay. He doesn't realize the mic's picking up. But
yeah, his mic's picking everything up he's saying. So.
Iberia, all that other stuff. Yeah, big, thick novels of travel and places. Listen, we will be there tomorrow. I'm going to give you the phone. He's going to talk to you about time and everything. Earlier was better, but I got to get back on the air.
Sometimes I imagine in your appraisal business, something that's totally unique. A book there's only one in the world, signed by somebody to somebody.
Which building?
That prevents a real challenge to you, does it not?
Well, it does, and in fact, Steve Steve had kind of talked about comparables before, and let me just clarify that a little bit. What is a comparable? We need to look at that. It's something that's not identical necessarily.
In another life, I lived.
It has elements of similarity, has elements.
Okay.
And so we look at items that are supposedly one of a kind out there, and companies say, well, how can you praise that? There's no value on it. I can't do that. Well, yes, you can. There's elements of similarity with other things on the market. And so that's what a valuer needs to do, is look at those things. And many times what is being reported then is something that's not the identical item. It's just other items that what we consider comparables.
Okay, I saw shelves.
And a lot of these things are also just the eye of the beholder.
We can help you. So we'll probably be there.
Problem in the book business. A lot.
Well, it's the eye of the beholder, but from a valuation standpoint, we're looking at the market as a whole. What the typical transaction is in the market, what the typical price is in the market. So all these things that are on the fringe, for instance, where somebody has an emotional tie to something, or they don't like something because of something. I mean, those become on the fringe, and that's not the typical transaction in a market. That's what we look at. So that's. I hope that clarifies.
I'm sorry. I have to jump out. Go ahead, Thorne.
Okay. What about genres? I guess the thing is, I'm just going books. I don't want to. I guess one way would say illegality. I've got something I'm going to show you. It's kind of a joke, but I happen to have a book signed by Heinrich Himmler. It was a Nazi guy. Okay. It's totally legal to sell in the United States. There are websites that sell Nazi memorabilia. I'm not making a political judgment here. But in some places, specifically the Democratic Republic of Germany, for many years, anything connected to, in that jurisdiction, for obvious reasons in World War II and the tragedy that occurred there, anything connected with Hitler and the Nazi Party and all that kind of good stuff was an unsaleable item, illegal to be selling. But yeah,
there was something on the books in Miami Beach. You couldn't sell anything with a SWAT sticker on it at one time.
Okay, so the question is, because you're not making a legal judgment about what's for sale in, what's legal in some countries, whether it be marijuana or a book with a swastika or something. Does that affect your appraisals, or is it something you notate saying in certain
that's a very interesting comment there, Thorne. We look at all sorts of markets, including black markets, believe it or not. For instance, let's just say something was illegal. Let's just say somebody brought in some elephant tusks from Africa. Sure. And they're not legal, in the U.S. Okay, the person smuggling them is in court being charged with this, and their attorney says we need to establish value to be able to set what their sentencing is.
Of course,
I remember reading that.
So the valuer steps in and goes, we need to look at what this is going for in the black market. And the courts accept it. Absolutely.
Interesting.
Just to change the subject for a second, I'm going to look at a whole bunch of James Michener's and a whole bunch of other signed stuff tomorrow. You can get good books after the sale. Anyway. That was
another example of... Another example we're talking about is fine jadeite, for instance. Jadeite from Burma, for instance. Right now, it's illegal in the U.S. There's still sanctions in Burma to bring in jade into the U.S. and ruby from Burma. The sanctions started back in, I think it was 2003, if I remember right, and it's been kind of locked down a little bit better and continued, even though all the other countries of the world have dropped these sanctions now. It's just the U.S. that has this, and I guess they're trying to cause some pressure for more democratic reforms or whatever within the country. I mean, I can tell you that it's, in my opinion, and from other people that I know in my profession, it has no effect on what's going on inside of Burma, but it looks good politically and on paper or whatever, So the bottom line is you can still sell the material once it's in here. It's just that if, in fact, when we're importing goods from overseas, one of the questions that FedEx Trade Services asks or our import brokers ask, is there ruby or jade in your shipment? And if there is, what's the origin? If it's Burmese, we can't bring it in. So that's one of those things. But once it's in the country, there's still a market highly functioning, for those goods. So it's not illegal to buy or sell once it's in the country. Goods have been in the country for years, and still they're saleable. So that's kind of an intriguing side.
I'll give you another intriguing. It's kind of abstract, and it's the Dr. Demento in me. But okay, what just sold for $137,650? George Zimmerman's gun.
Oh, is that what it went for? Wow.
Yeah, I was going to bring that up, Steve.
Let me finish. Wait, I'll tell you what I did research. Al Capone's 38 went for $29,000 less than that gun. My after comment was that is truly sick, and it was purchased by John Smith. What would an appraiser do with something like that down the road? I would not want to be the appraiser who appraised that firearm, but.
Well, again, elements of some similarity with other notorious, guns that have been sold in the marketplace. That's all you could do. I mean, it's there's not a hard, fast thing saying this is the price. I mean, it's what is an appraised value? What is it? It's an opinion of monetary worth, opinion of expertise in that market, of comparables. You could actually have 10 comparables for an item, and yet your opinion of value may not be any one of those. It may not be any one of those. It may, in the opinion of that value, or it may be somewhere that's at the top or the bottom, or just not any of those 10 comparables per se. That those 10 comparables form a basis for that opinion. But it's that valuer's experience in that marketplace that's going to dictate what their conclusion is, what their value conclusion is. It's not a formula. It's not numbers saying, I've got 3 numbers here, I'm going to take the middle one. No, not at all. It forms a basis, but that's it. It comes down to an opinion of value in that marketplace. And that's what the courts have said repeatedly over and over again. Valuation is an opinion, professional opinion with basis.
Yeah, it's crazy. I mean, I don't know. I'm not going to say it about this gun. I don't want to plant seeds in anyone's head. But when Jack Ruby, that was another infamous firearm. The guy who eventually wound up with it tried to bring it to the White House one day. I remember the story. That caused a lot of problems, and he lost it for a while. But they were going to charge $1,000 a bullet for 100 bullets fired out of the gun. The spent casing, the shell, the bullet, and a note. And it's crazy with this stuff. I made a joke out of this today. Heritage Auctions auctioned off a lock of Thomas Jefferson's hair, 14 strands, authenticated from the surgeon that did the autopsy, all of that. That great provenance. But like all the other locks of hair that have been purchased recently, and famous people, they were purchased anonymously, like John Smith with the gun. And on a tongue-in-cheek note, I wonder who is buying all this anonymous hair. Is it the aliens trying to get their DNA experiments right? Or is Hannibal real? And it's really getting, it's not, the dress is going to be made out of hair this time. I don't know.
Who knows? Who knows? It's interesting, though, along those lines, Stephen Thorne, and that is the courts have looked at acquisitions, what the prices have been paid for certain acquisitions as evidence of value. Doesn't mean that they're going to go with that, but it's evidence of value. Let's just say that in the case of the Zimmerman gun, for instance, Okay, it's be reported sold for, what did you say, Steve? 100 and what?
137,650.
Okay, that is evidence of value for that in the marketplace. Now, let's just say the person was drunk when they bought it. Well, all of a sudden you throw it out, because they didn't have they weren't using their full faculties. Maybe they didn't have reasonable knowledge of relevant facts in a marketplace, so you throw it out. I mean, that's so. So anyways, so you have to look at the whole transaction to see if it's a valid transaction to look at. And if you have no other transactions to look at, no other transactions, you should be looking at the one transaction to see if it's a valid one to use that is in front of your face, the one that just occurred. So I mean, like I say, you don't necessarily go with that number, but at least it provides some basis, it provides some element to look at out there.
Hold on one second, Bill. YM3ABNG. I hope it didn't just say something in code that was offensive, but I'm joking with you. Let me know what your question is. Type it into the message. We have somebody asking a question.
I have to go to, of all things, a birthday party.
Happy birthday, and may I be the first to wish them a happy birthday 2017.
Fairly quickly. But I do have a new book I was going to show you if you have the time. If not, I can do it next week.
I'm going to...
Interesting.
Go ahead.
Are you ready for
wait, go ahead. Give me 1 second. What I am going to do, YM3ABNG, is I'm going to send you my email address. Email me the question that you have. If it's about a book, send me pictures. And go ahead, Thorne. I'm sorry.
Okay. It's, again, a reference book, which I get a huge kick out of. It's a history of pornography. It's by Hyde. It's recognized by the courts as the reference book. But I got one with an interesting inscription. To Don and Lucy, who have the original manuscript of which this work, bear in mind, this is a 1964 book, which a British guy from Jurisdictions, which was asking about that, which the author's legal advisors insist should be drastically, I can't read it, if he wants to keep out of jail. From their namesake, with great respect and some trepidation. This is a 1964 book, published in Britain. The author's signature gifted it to somebody in the United States, and there was an issue in '64 about this book. Now, totally problem-free. But the author's inscription here to these people was saying about the manuscript, please get rid of the manuscript. So I don't know if it's a joke or not, but apparently in '64 that the book is still regarded as a reference, as a classic reference book. But anyway, I have to go to the birthday party, gentlemen.
Happy birthday, Thorne. Thanks for being with us.
Your stuff, very interesting. Obviously, I'm very...
happy birthday, Thorne.
Yeah, it's not me. It's a friend of mine.
That's it. She.
But anyway, the focus of those other questions gives a good example of the depth of your profession and how difficult, how many things you have to bring into play to make an accurate judgment on anything. So.
Yeah, it was a great discussion. I enjoyed it.
Thank you, guys.
Likewise. And Bill, what you should do, wait a minute. What you should do is type in how people can get hold of you, because somebody is asking for email. Somebody, YM, in the message column, YM3ABNG, she has trouble writing in this space. So I gave her my email address, but you should put in the message column to contact AIS and learn more. Here's where you go. And thank you for joining us. Ladies and gentlemen, the Rare Book Cafe is brought to you by the Florida Antiquarian Book Fair. 36 years of celebrating the fine art of happy book selling. March 11th, 12th, and 13th of 2017. We hope to see you there. And we'll be back in 2 weeks. All the programs are off next week. We're going to be back on air live with everything, Bucks on the Bookshelf and the Rare Book Cafe on June 4th. And happy birthday, Edie, on June 5th. You got it, Bill?
Thanks,
Sure.
Dave. I'm typing it in now, so it'll
Okay, well, I can't click off until you do. I don't know if it'll go away.
Oh.
I don't know if it'll kill the connection or not.
I don't know if this is going in or not.
Well, once you type it in and do it, I'll tell you, because right now
Are they looking for my contact information?
Yeah, well, it's either yours or mine. I'll tell you what. Don't worry about it. If she emails me and she's asking you a question, I'll forward it to you.
Yeah, I mean, you can go to aisociety.com, aisociety.com, and there's a registry of our valuers that are certified, for instance, various countries of the world. You can contact me by Bill Korst, BILLKORST as in Tom, at aisociety.com. They can also call me at 952-944-9443. So that's my contact info.
Thanks, let me know when you get that thing. I want to hear when you laugh about it. That diamond thing I said to you about diamonds. Talk to you down the road, my friend. Thanks for being with us. Ladies and gentlemen, we'll see you May 4th. Thank you.
Great Blab. Thanks.
Ciao.
June 4th.
Yeah, all right. Don't worry about it.